as well. You guys know how fast this webinar sold out. We're actually really interested in just seeing what you think of it, and if you wish there was more information about certain things, or you'd like different webinars in the future. So we'll pop that in the comments towards the end as well. So if you could kind of hang around to fill that out, that would be really helpful for us as well. So the aims of our webinar today is to provide you guys with information about what normal adjustment looks like, and about the anxiety that kind of we're expecting to see with most kids when they're kind of coming back to school after what's been quite a difficult time for everyone. Also to kind of highlight things that we should consider for children, young people and their families during lockdown, and as we're kind of moving out of it as well, and to provide practical solutions for supporting children and young people as well as neurodiverse children, and how to support them best back into school. So the kind of run through that we're going to do today is have a think about why we're talking about adjustment, what that is, and how do we make sense of the anxiety. And we'll have a think about how to support yourself as well as other staff in your team. We'll think about student adjustments as well as kind of family adjustments. And we'll think about what adjusting might look like in young people, so what kind of things we'll be seeing, and what kind of things we can do to help with that. And we'll also have a wee think about how to support the mental health and well-being of neurodiverse children as they kind of adjust to new school routines. And we've got a couple of slides at the end just about web-based resources, and then we'll have about 15 minutes at the end to take questions as well. So I'll pass you over to Becky.
Okay. So thank you, Natasha. Life since COVID has changed dramatically throughout the world. For you as teachers, you know this, you're delivering lessons online, your living in spare rooms have become your classroom. And I'm sure there's been those moments when you're not really sure if that child is thinking really hard, or you realise their screen is just frozen. So we know that getting back to normal is going to take some time. And how quickly or smooth a process is going to be is just impossible to know. Whilst it seems like we're getting back to some sense of normality, we mustn't be fooled into thinking things will go back to the way they were overnight. This cannot be a rushed process. Now, thinking back to the start of lockdown, our responses may have included some fear or anxiety. However, as we've adapted and grown used to lockdown, that anxiety may have alleviated over time. In other words, we have adjusted. So I'm going to break down what this adjustment has and might look like into these 4 areas. So thinking about how this links to some anxiety, how we can support ourselves, fellow staff members, and then looking at what specific student adjustments and family adjustments might look like. So as humans, we have a variety of responses when adjusting to sudden change, including a range of emotions alongside that. Coping, freezing, anger or frustration, low mood and hopelessness. Chances are we've experienced all of these responses at some point during lockdown, maybe multiple emotions in the same day. These are all normal reactions and emotional responses when adjusting to change. It's when these responses become hard to shift that some problems can occur, for example, persistent low mood over days and weeks. Therefore, it's worthwhile keeping an eye on our mood and how flexible it is through this adjustment out of lockdown. Now, adjustment and anxiety go hand in hand so often. It's very likely that we will see anxiety responses in children when returning to school. And again, this is a normal response to a perceived threat or fear that is unknown. We know that we have an inbuilt fight, flight, freeze system that supports our body in preparing for danger. And this can present itself in the modern human as emotional arousal, which can feel really unpleasant. Things like your heart racing, your worrying thoughts, those butterflies you get in your tummy. Rational thinking and the ability to learn becomes really hard to do when you're in this emotional arousal state. These are all signs of anxiety, and that fight, flight, freeze response has been triggered. So in other words, your body has sensed or perceived nearby threat or danger. Now, we'll look at this again in a little bit more detail later on with Clemmy, and there is also a link on the screen to a really useful video that explains the fight, flight, freeze system in a bit more detail. Now, when you go on holiday and you're waiting to take off on the plane, the safety messages come through. If the oxygen should fail, put on your own mask first before helping others. Put on theirs. This is exactly the same message that we are giving to families and professionals in supporting children and young people with their emotional and mental well-being. Now, in a normal year, coming back after the summer holidays will hopefully still be an exciting and full of promise. You take time in that break to recharge, to rest, properly relax before tackling that new academic year, and you're ensuring you're recharged and strengthened. This year brings a whole set of new challenges, and it's important to ensure that your own well-being is maintained. It's okay to have those emotions of fear, anxiety, confusion, and anger that we've been seeing throughout. But it's also okay to know that you might need to take a step back or ask help from others before you can begin to support your students. Be kind to yourself. Know that this is going to be a long process of adjustment and continually adjusting. Now, we know that students will have responded to lockdown in a variety of ways. For some, lockdown will have been protective of their mental health and well-being. Those with school-related anxiety or low mood will have benefited from a break away from continually living and facing those emotional responses. For others, lockdown will have forced them to remain closer to an unstable environment with little space to take a break. Others still may simply be missing out on the social contact and support from friends and teachers, and they'll be really keen to get back to school. We know that those with additional support needs will have required a whole other level of support to settle them into this new lockdown routine. And they may now have finally eased into it, so getting them to transition back out again is going to require even more support, provision, and understanding. So what might this look like for students in August? This may well be the same sort of response for all of us. That morning commute is going to be a shock to the system. Students have been out of their typical school routine, not having to get up at a set time, travelling to school, concentrating for the duration of a 9 till 3 school day. We know there's a natural readjustment after the summer holidays, but this is going to be an even bigger adjustment, having been away from school for 4 to 5 months. Coming back to school after the holidays in a normal year results in an array of emotions for students. With lockdown in mind, those responses may be heightened, exaggerated, and for some children may look very different to how they might usually respond. And this might present itself as separation anxiety, which I know Natasha's going to chat about a little bit more later on. There may be greater or new fears about going back to school. Things such as rules, structure, closeness to peers are all elements that children have been without for a substantial amount of time. Now, there will be those with an added adjustment of having suffered a loss during lockdown, and they also might need some further time to process this. We may see friendships having changed dramatically, some people falling out with each other, and others blossoming new friendships that you might not have realised would happen. Children may have even lost skills in effective communication with peers on a face-to-face basis, or knowing what to talk with about that person, having relied on technology and the context of games, for example, to chat with their friends. And then, of course, there are those who are transitioning. We know that we've got nursery children coming up to P1, P7s moving into academies going into S1, and of course, for all the leavers, having never really had their proper goodbyes in the form of proms, end-of-year shows, and leaver ceremonies. These are all adjustments that may require some acknowledgement. So what about families? Families as a whole have had a range of adjustments to contend with, and I'm going to break these into 3 key areas: adjusting to the new work-life schedule, schooling at home, and support systems. Now, parental work has probably been affected by lockdown for all families. Furlough, setting up working from home whilst juggling childcare, or frontline workers feeling guilty about putting their loved ones at risk, to the extent that some will have temporarily moved out of the family home, or not knowing how to put childcare in place during lockdown restrictions. Work during lockdown will have had a big impact on the family unit. Now, whilst many parents will have tried their best in supporting children with their schoolwork, we know that this will not be the case for all families. There will be those who struggle to support their child, either through their own uncertainty about academic work or a lack of motivation to put structure in place for their children. Some parents may have put timetables into action, others may assume their child will just get on with it. We may also encounter parents who finally see those behaviours that are demonstrated in the classroom but aren't typically present at home, which can be concerning for parents. Finally, thinking about support systems in the form of friends and extended family, those have been removed. Older siblings may have had to take on more responsibility, adding to their own stress, and then the temporary removal of support from extended family will again have had a huge impact on family life and adjustment during lockdown. So again, looking ahead to August, separation anxiety, again, that can go many ways. It won't just be from the child that we can potentially see this. Scheduling and workload will be a huge component to this family adjustment. What may have finally settled into a routine with schooling at home, childcare and working from home is now a new venture into juggling family schedules around children's timetables for when they're in school or being sent remote lessons. There may even be some jealousy about children being able to get back to some sense of normality whilst parents are still furloughed. Even with clear instructions, there's always parents who are anxious or simply don't read the information that you give them about social distancing, safety measures being put in place, timetabling, you name it. Remaining calm, giving clear instructions will be really supportive for those families, even if you feel like you're repeating yourself again and again. There will also be continued concerns about child safety, to the extent that some parents will opt to keep their children at home until a later phase of lockdown removal. For some, this might actually be necessary due to shielding loved ones at home. And this can impact family relationships again if children resent not being able to go to school at the same time as their friends. So think about focusing on what you can control. This is a lot to consider, and it will be hard at times to spot these different adjustments within children. You can't force children to talk about their emotions or experiences, but you can create a space for them to do so when they're ready. You can allow time for adjustment that is extended beyond the normal start of school period. You can be aware of your own emotional responses and adjustment to lockdown when returning to school. You can be kind to yourself. Ultimately, it's about focusing on what we each individually can control. Just because school is back in session and lockdown is easing doesn't mean those anxieties and fearful responses will immediately melt away for everyone. This is going to take time. Okay, I'm going to hand over to you, Natasha.
Thank you very much, Becky. So now we're going to have a wee think about what the process of adjusting might look like and what kind of things we can do to help children and young people that are going through it. So this is just kind of, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's just the kind of things that we're expecting to see a bit more often and what kind of things you might notice in children and young people. So like Becky was talking about with the fight, flight or freeze, we are expecting to see, more children complaining of sore tummies, sore heads, especially in younger children. Some children might be worrying about kind of corona symptoms. So, saying, I didn't really taste my lunch today. Does that mean I need to go home? Do I need to get tested? So kind of worrying about those kind of things. We'd also be expecting children to have difficulty sleeping at the moment. So that might be, if they're on the kind of blended timetable, actually the days before going back into school, they might be struggling to sleep. So you might be noticing that actually they're struggling to concentrate in class more than they normally would have. as we've been talking about a lot, the kind of fight, flight or freeze. So expecting an increase in those kind of anxiety symptoms that Becky was telling us about, but also potentially low mood. So kind of finding that they're struggling with motivation, struggling to get out of bed in the morning, maybe feeling a bit more irritable. And we're kind of thinking about if that started during lockdown, and when we kind of be concerned would be if it continues a long time after lockdown's finished. We're also thinking about maybe an increase in school avoidance. So that might be children who were avoiding school in the first place, or it might be children that have been going to school fine. So for some children, it might be that they're struggling to be actually physically back in school. But some children might be worrying about family members and siblings or parents who are at home that day while they're in school, so they might just prefer to be with their family. We'd also be having a think about children might be isolating themselves from family, friends, or from you guys as class teachers as well. So just noticing if actually it was a child that usually was quite chatty or quite engaging, if they're kind of taking a step back from friendships or from you guys. We also might be noticing children who are struggling to manage their emotions. So that might be, children being more tearful in times that you wouldn't really be expecting it, or might be a bit more irritable or having angry outbursts. So just paying attention to noticing those kind of things. Some children might be asking for reassurance in times that they wouldn't normally. So asking questions like, are you sure it's definitely safe for us to be here? Or some children might know the stages of kind of lockdown lifting inside out and repeat those to you or repeat them to other members of their class. As Becky was saying, we might see an increase in separation anxiety. So children might worry about being away from their parents or even from other siblings. They're used to being in a kind of almost class at home with their siblings. So now being away from them in a different classroom, or even a sibling being at home while they're in school, that might be really difficult for some children. And it might be that actually they need more contact with their families at home or more contact with the siblings in other classes than they normally would do. We also might notice children acting out more in class. So that might be that they're deliberately trying to get out of class because they're just not tolerating being in class as much as they normally would. Or they might just be unable to sit learning for a longer period than they normally would. I know a lot of the children I've been speaking to say that they get most of their schoolwork done in the mornings and then they get to do what they want in the afternoons. So it's about kind of recognising that things have been different while they've been at home. And there's also been in the classroom, there's going to be a lot more distractions and stimulation than they're used to at home, because they're used to a class size of, maximum 5 or 6 really. And so it's going to make it a bit harder to sit with a lot more people in the class as well. So what kind of things can we do to help? So we've thought about this section in three different things. So communication, patience, and creating a safe environment for children. So to start with communication, so asking lots of open questions. So changing your why questions to what questions. So, I wonder what made that hard for you instead of why was that hard? And just recognizing that different children will need different things from you. So just, asking your open questions and being curious to finding out what it is they need. And some ideas of things you can do to help with that is trying to communicate with home and the child as much as possible. So encouraging parents to keep in touch with how things have been at home and if they've been struggling over this lockdown period. But also asking what's worked well at home. Actually, are there strategies that they found at home that maybe can be implemented in school and could make that transition period a lot easier for children? And you can agree a plan of how often and how to communicate with home and how the young person can communicate with their teacher when they aren't in school as well, so that they know what they're doing with schoolwork and things. and keep an open dialogue about corona and mental health as well. So keep the response consistent between school and home. So, if we're still saying in school you should be washing your hands regularly, wash for 20 seconds, those kind of things. Make sure everyone's saying to do that at home as well, so that it doesn't feel like the transition during the week, especially with blended learning, feels a bit too much for children. And model positive behaviour. Becky gave us some great ideas on how to do this. But the best way for children to learn healthy coping strategies is from observing you guys doing them. So if that's practicing self-care, saying, actually, today was the first day of term for me, so actually I went for a really long walk last night and that really helped me, just letting them know what kind of things you're doing. But also talking about how you're feeling within a kind of boundaried approach. So saying, actually, this is a bit weird for me, being back in the building and seeing you face to face instead of over a computer again. And for some of you, that might mean, actually, if you're struggling and actually the things that children are bringing up, that might be bringing feelings of anxiety within you as well. That might mean asking for additional help for yourself, so speaking to your managers and things like that. And as we've kind of chatted about a lot, this is going to take time. We need to kind of be patient with ourselves and patient with children and patient with families. Different children are going to adjust at different speeds, and that's even within different households. And although we've all been through this experience and we've all shared it together, lockdown's been very different for different families. And the different things that they have going on for themselves. So we need to be patient with them as well. And don't expect the adjustment period to only take a couple of weeks. It takes us so long to start writing 2020 in our papers instead of 2019. And obviously this adjustment is emotionally loaded, so it's going to take longer, and that's totally okay. Just kind of reminding yourselves that it's okay for you and it's okay for children as well. And obviously, as Becky was saying, pay special attention to the children who are going to struggle coming back to school. So thinking about children who have transitioned, it's going to be a huge time for them. And also those who have a difficult home life, actually maybe lockdown's been really, really tough for them, or those who have suffered a loss as well. And the kind of final thing we'll chat about that we can do is create a safe environment in school as much as we can. So that involves reaffirming boundaries and rules, and being consistent as possible. Visual prompts such as washing hands, catching sneezes, those kind of things might be helpful to put up around school. And being clear about the things that we can and can't do in school now. So, going up to your friends and hugging them after seeing them for a long time, being clear that that's something we're not allowed to do anymore, and that we have to keep a certain distance and things like that. And if there's new rules in the corridors or for classrooms, make sure everyone knows them. We were kind of reflecting that actually there's probably going to be different doors that you have to walk through, or certain ways you have to walk through the corridors and things. And that'll be really confusing for your primary sevens as well as your kind of older children that are kind of moving to the academy and things. Actually, being gentle with people, it's a new rule for everyone, and it's okay if people are going to forget it. Often, so your kind of visual cues and things like that will be really helpful, so that you don't have to repeat them over and over again. Children will benefit from being reminded of the old school rules as well. While they've been at home, they've not had to raise their hand for attention, or I know a lot of you kind of do the clapping and things like that to keep the class quiet. That's something that won't have been happening at home, so they're not used to that. So just reminding them of actually that's what we're expecting to happen again. And offering children boundaried reassurance is really going to help. We know that lots of reassurance isn't helpful in the long run, so try and offer reassurance once or twice and then move on. And one thing that we also thought would be really helpful is that make sure each child has an identified adult that they can go to if they're struggling, and they know who that is before starting school. And kind of lastly, offering more breaks in classes if children are needing them. I think we're probably going to need them too. We're not used to having a whole day in the way that it's going to be again. So we're probably going to need the breaks, and children are definitely going to need them as well, especially the kind of younger kids. So I'll hand you over to Clemmy.
Thank you so much. We're now going to spend a bit of time thinking about how we support the mental health of our neurodiverse young people as they come into the new school routine. So by neurodiverse kids, you'll all be aware, I'm thinking about kids on the spectrum, kids with learning disability, so the kids who have got those global cognitive deficits, and ADHD as well. And we know that a number of these kids are going to struggle just because transitions are harder for them anyway. They may need more time and more targeted support to manage this transition and to get used to how school is going to look. We know that some of them, and we've been talking with parents, obviously through CAMHS and our contact with families, some people are really enjoying the lack of structure and not having to get kids out of the home in the morning. Other families are reporting finding it much more challenging. You know, they're missing the respite that they get from family members, from the hours their kids would typically have spent at school. And they're all aware they've got another couple of months ahead of this going on. Families will have spent a bit of time in each of these camps, just some families spending more time in one perhaps than the other. You'll, I suppose, be picking up on a theme that what we're saying is that adjusting takes time, and this is to be expected. Families and kids, they can be supported to implement strategies that are going to help them feel safe, nurtured and included. Natasha has just helped us think about how we can support our neurotypical kids as they come back to school. And a lot of what I go through will add and build on what Natasha has said, but just through that lens of our neurodiverse population. So we can expect again to see that heightened anxiety. We're coming back to thinking about that fight, flight, freeze response. Fight looking like our angry outbursts, temper tantrums, challenging behaviour, kids feeling frustrated, perhaps kids self-harming. For our neurodiverse kids, you might see more of that sort of head banging, gnawing on hands, chewing on jumpers. The flight side of things looking like tearful children, avoiding, being fearful, perhaps trying to run away from classrooms or teachers. Freezing looking like kids just not taking part, an inability to respond to questions or requests, or kids just seeming a bit zoned out. We may expect to see again in our neurodiverse population an increase in reassurance seeking or perhaps self-soothing behaviours that they take part in. And school refusal within this population as well, perhaps refusing to get on their school transport or challenging behaviour when they're there, and difficulty separating from parents in particular. So we come back to thinking about anxiety, and that big message we're giving is that we kind of expect to see this across all school children on the return to school. Certainly some kids will be more robust and will just be happy to be back, but there will be, we think, a big population that are going to find it hard. With our neurodiverse cohort, it may be more difficult for them to be able to identify and label what it is they're feeling. They may find it harder to understand and hold a narrative about why these feelings have come about. All they know is that they've got these feelings in their body, that racing heart, the whirring mind, the pounding head, and it feels really unpleasant. So when I go to school or when I'm getting on school transport, I've got this horrible sensation and I just want away from it. We can think about anxiety as sitting within sort of an emotional arousal cycle. We've got the green phase there, and green is that lovely, relaxed, calm state that we want kids to be in at school. They're chilled out, they're using the thinking bit of their brain, and they're able to engage with whatever activities you've got going on in the classroom. We know that when kids get anxious or when they get angry, they start to have an emotional adrenal response. So adrenaline starts flowing around their body, and we enter this amber phase of an escalation of emotion. Kids in this amber phase, we can expect them to be a bit more reactive. They might look anxious, agitated. You might see visible distress in kids as they head up through amber. And then a lot of kids will hit that red crisis phase. So if you've got kids that go to the fight part of flight or fight, they've maybe hit out. They're maybe screaming. If they go to that flight part, that running away bit of fight or flight, it may be that they're trying to escape from the classroom. It may be that at this point is when you hear things from kids like, I want to die, I don't want to be here anymore. That really alarming stuff that is a child communicating that they're just not coping in the moment. Once crisis has worked through, kids enter that blue phase, the recovery phase, where they're calming down. When kids are in recovery, we need to be careful not to re-trigger back into crisis. It's very easy to do when people are in the recovery phase. That is not the time to go over what happened and start telling people off. And once they've gone all the way through recovery, we end up in that post-crisis sort of depressed phase where kids can be really tearful. They can feel really bad in themselves. They can feel a little bit hopeless. And throughout this emotional arousal, it's holding in mind that quality of judgment of a young person, their ability to communicate and reason, which might already be really difficult for our neurodiverse kids, is even more significantly impaired. You may have kids coming into school in the morning that have already been through this arousal cycle at home. They may have already had this trying to get dressed in the morning. Parents may have already had it trying to get kids out of the door and onto their transport or in the car. So there's a chance that kids coming into class are already sitting either in that amber phase or that blue phase. You might be seeing bits of red out in the playground. Okay. We're going to have a wee think about strategies to help keep kids in the green. We've listed it there, 1 to 10, and I suppose you can think of this just as a wee bit of a checklist. When you're thinking about kids who are struggling, you can go back to the stuff and think, well, have we thought about information, structure, etc., and go back and revisit it and work through what supports might be put in place. And it may be helpful for you thinking about where and how to direct what I appreciate will be really limited resources for you. So information, in an ideal world, everyone would know what it's going to look like going back to school in August. As a parent myself, I'm very aware that nobody really knows what it's going to look like. The plan, hopefully, is that kids will be back full time, but there is that contingency for blended. And I suppose at this point in time, it's just being aware, and I know it's already in your minds, that even if you don't know what's happening, just sending that email to families to say we're still not quite sure what it's going to look like, but these are the bits that we can share. And I'm aware that those emails are already coming out from schools. So we're thinking about the what, the when, and the how. So who are the new teachers going to be? Can teachers be sending out little introductory videos to their new classes? What will the new classrooms look like? You know, if you're doing visual tours of your classrooms, can we do one of the classroom may look like this, the classroom may look like this, depending on what the back to school plan is? Can we send out information beforehand about hand washing to kids throughout the year groups from P1 to P7 and then S1 to S6 about what the expectation is going to be? Is it a way of letting families know that their kid's going to be in a class with their particular friends? Is that something that is able to be accommodated or thought about? How are they going to have lunch? And what will the school day routine look like? Is it going to be normal hours? Are there going to be increased breaks? If you guys know any of that stuff and that can be shared with families, then that will be helpful. Because again, the conversations we're already having with families is them saying we just don't know what it's going to look like and we're feeling really anxious about it, never mind the kids. If you can support parents to think about when they share information with their children, that would be really helpful. Some parents might just be a bit of an open book and sharing absolutely everything that comes through with their child. Some kids won't manage that as well as others, and a much shorter lead-in time just gives them less time to worry. And how? We can do this through social stories, through video meet and greets, video tours, and you'll be aware that different children will require different levels of detail. If we think about structure of the school day, if possible, can we share that? It would hopefully give families the opportunity to think about building in a more formal structure to home life in those sort of 1 or 2 weeks before they're heading back to school. It then allows kids the opportunity to think about what school timings will be, when to expect their breaks, when hand washing is going to be required, when there will be working time and free time. This is really important for our kids with learning disabilities and who are on the spectrum, because there's going to be enough going on at school that's going to be new. So as much as we can give them in terms of preparation, and actually I know this is snack time because that's been snack time at home for the last wee while. I know this is when we do our sitting down and our writing jobs. You might want to think about use of a visual timetable in class if you're not already using one, and I'm aware that most primaries you will have these in place already. And our special schools, you guys will all be using these. But for those in academy, it might be helpful to have visual timetables just to show the number of jobs that a young person is going to be expected to do within that period. Use of schedules, just to keep things really predictable for kids, can be helpful. We can use visual aids to support this, so our visual timetables like we've spoken about, but now and next schedules can be really helpful for our neurodiverse kids. So we've got our first job in the green and our then job in the red. And the then job can also be that motivating task, that one that you know a kid's going to work hard for. With regard to choice, we're thinking that a lot of kids will have had more choice at home. You know, parents have had to flex routines. It may have been that case of, we'll do whatever you want, just don't bother mummy or daddy because we've got a meeting, we've got work to do. And so kids are going to need a period of time for the new routine to embed. And whilst that new routine is embedding, kids may feel supported and understood by being given a bit of a choice between maybe 2 or 3 activities. And again, as I'm sure you'll all be aware, it's just holding in mind that some kids are going to need time to build back up to the work or jobs that they had been doing previously. Certainly a feature of the emotional distress of young people and families throughout lockdown is that, you know, we see and we hear about lots of regressions in behaviours. So with our neurodiverse kids, perhaps kids that previously have been toilet trained, you know, they're maybe back soiling and need a bit more of support with that. Kids who had been managing some independent jobs, you know, parents are saying that they're now wanting mum or dad by their side at all times to get things done. Keeping connected, super important. We know lots of parents are already feeling really anxious about how their kid's going to cope with the return to school. Communication books, where possible, can be really helpful for a couple of reasons. One is that it can support anxious kids knowing that even if the mornings are really difficult, it's a real challenge to get their kid into school in the morning, that once they're there, their child is able to engage in some meaningful activity. And the second one is that it can provide really helpful evidence for you and parents that if things aren't getting better over time, some additional support might be beneficial, whether that's from extra one-to-one in class, whether it's thinking about, do we need educational psychology to come alongside just now, or are we thinking this is a CAMHS referral if the evidence is things continue to be really difficult at school and at home. Kids might be talking a lot when they come in about mummies and daddies and brothers and sisters and grannies and carers, and it can be quite nice just to help them feel connected. You know, they're saying, oh, I wonder what mummy's doing. Okay, it sounds, darling, like you're thinking about mummy. Well, why don't we draw a card or do a little note for her to take home? It just helps sort of encourage children to hold school and home in mind as places where there are safe adults that can respond to their needs. What's important to the child? So again, and it'll be in all your minds as well, that kids will have been spending more time at home doing the things that interest them. And for lots of kids, that'll mean an increase in screen time, time on their tablets, time on TV. And that's just been a survival strategy. You know, that's what as parents we're needing to do to meet our other commitments and obligations, or to even just get 5 minutes to have a cup of tea. Having up-to-date information about special interests and favourite activities can really help with that bit about thinking, well, what's going to be a motivating task to support kids who are going to struggle engaging with schoolwork as they come back. And it may be that you've got to have just tiny little bursts, obviously, of doing schoolwork with a period of an enjoyed or a preferred activity. But knowing and holding in mind that this can be scaled back over time. You know, over time we can increase the amount of schoolwork that's being accomplished and reduce the reliance on motivating tasks. So maybe find out how much time kids have been spending on their tasks and special interests at home. You know, find out from parents roughly how the school day, the day at home has been spent. If kids have been, you know, spending hours in the garden every day, then that's helpful information just for knowing why the transition to school may be particularly difficult for them. If we think about communication and sensory needs, again, with our neurodiverse kids, they've been at home with close family members for the past 4 months, and lots of these kids will really have enjoyed that. They'll have enjoyed having parents to themselves. They'll have enjoyed not having to deal with the social rules and expectations that come in the school environment. We can anticipate that school buildings can be really overwhelming from a sensory point of view, particularly for our our preschoolers transitioning up to P1, and for our P7s transitioning up to academy. Our allied health professionals, so those are our occupational therapy team, our speech and language therapist, and our physiotherapist, they are providing helpful information about supporting children with communication and sensory needs, and that should be in a pack on the CAMHS, NHS CAMHS website towards the middle or end of July, is what they're working to. But certainly when we come to communication, behaviour is communication. So what is a child communicating through their behaviour? Are they communicating they're distressed, they're anxious, they're bored? Are they thirsty? Do they just not want to be there? Are they missing people at home? Are they missing their Lego? Are they communicating that they're somewhere on the arousal cycle? But also be mindful of the silent child, the child that seems to be managing just fine. They're getting their head down. They're doing the bits and pieces that you're putting in front of them. Why is that? Is this because this is a child that genuinely is feeling safe and secure? Or is it that they don't know how to communicate what's going on? These may be the kids that parents are saying, we're having an absolute nightmare when we pick them up from school. That's when they're doing their meltdown. And again, we know, because we see it a lot through CAMHS, is that kids hold on to an awful lot throughout the school day. They don't explode whilst they're there, but that's what parents are dealing with. We can use communication aids to encourage all forms of communication, including non-verbal. Some of you will be really familiar with things like Makaton or talking mats, or PEX board, other communication aids that kids are coming into school with. For some of you, it might be a bit of a reskilling, because we've had this whole period where we've been working from home and not necessarily using these tools every day with our children and young people. Have you had a think about creating safe spaces for kids? And I know that you'll all have been working really hard to think about social distancing and how many people you can have in classrooms, and where we're going to put the kids that are reporting feeling unwell. Where's the hub childcare going to be? But has there also been a bit of thinking around, well, where's the quiet space for our kids that are just completely overwhelmed, sensorily overloaded, and are needing a bit of time out to calm down? You can use wriggle breaks, sensory diets. The occupational therapist, I'm sure, will include information about those for people that aren't familiar. Progressive muscle relaxation. Can we build in yoga, controlled breathing? All of this stuff can be used to stop kids going into the red, but they can also be helpful when kids are in the blue as well. Right. Giving positive attention. You know, kids and their parents, their carers, are going to be looking for that extra reassurance as they adjust back to school. We can think about providing positive attention through saying, you know what, we can't do this stuff, but look at all the things we can do. So where we can't hug our friends, this is a lovely wee video that just shows lots of other ways of saying hi, you know, thumbs up, waving. Kids might be doing things to seek proximity to you. I'm sure you can all think of the wee toots that are always up at the front of the class, wanting to lean against you, wanting to cuddle in close. And this may feel really challenging given social distancing expectations. It might just be helpful as a staff group to think about how you're going to manage that. You'll be aware that some children are going to be needing that additional one-to-one support during the transition, whether that's support at handover in the morning at the school gate, or if it's support to come in and sit down in the classroom. You'll have some kids that I'm sure are already coming into the class before the bulk of the class arrives because they need that quiet time to settle, and other kids that come in after the rest of the class have already busied in for the day. We can do that positive attention with our neurodiverse kids by being curious about how they're feeling. You know, you can label their feelings for them. Oh gosh, you might feel excited about that. You look very happy today. Oh, I wonder if you're perhaps disappointed about that. And using visual tools to support this exploration. You know, we can do that sort of reading the room at the start of the day. So kids, how's everybody doing? Is anybody feeling okay? Who's feeling good? Is anybody not so sure, not so good? We can use our talking mats, the feelings thermometer, the 5-point scale, and we will put links and information about all of this in the information pack we'll make available. We can show and give ideas to young people about how to feel better or how to feel different. Class, I notice that you're all looking really wriggly. Shall we all do a bit of our bubble breathing together? Or let's do some of our big cat stretches. These are things that you can do and communicate. This is what helps me feel better. Let's give it a try together. Some of your kids, it might be engaging with them with their special objects, their toys, or their activities where communication is particularly difficult or challenging. And we can support kids to go to quiet spaces, such as their snoozalins, which some of the special schools will have, or tents that you might be able to set up in spaces in the class. And looking after you, the arousal cycle applies to all of us. We all have bits and pieces going on in our lives that can mean it doesn't take much to tip us into the amber. Typically, as adults, we have a few strategies that we're quite good at implementing to keep us in the amber and bring us back down to the green. And think about what it is that works for you. It may be helpful to take time as a group to think about how the transition is going to draw on your personal and your professional resources, thinking about how you can look after each other, what support is available, and thinking with your senior management about what support would be helpful. Are all ways of making sure that you guys have the resources to nurture and absorb some of what the kids are going to be bringing and throwing at you after the summer holidays. There's a page here, just a link to some web-based resources for supporting children with the adjustment process. We've got the CAMHS website here. We are busy working on information packs for children. One's for parents of younger children, there'll be one for adolescents, there'll be one for our neurodiverse young people. That will be available towards the end of July, that parents and families can be directed to, but it might be worth having a wee nosy yourselves to see what we're saying. The third space is a fantastic website about supporting children on the autistic spectrum with getting back to school. CAMHS Resources is a lovely one that has pulled together recommended readings, websites, apps that are commonly used throughout CAMHS teams across the United Kingdom. The BPS released a document specific to education and educational psychologists around supporting kids back to school, and anybody can view that. And this one here, Anna Freud, touches on some of the bits and pieces that we've spoken about today around communication, but it does have some nice links to it, to some mental health resources for young people who may be struggling. All right, so that's us. We're going to have a wee look at some of the questions that have come through, if any. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with Teams, but if you start moving your mouse about on the screen, you should get something come up that's got the camera, the mic, 3 dots, and there's a little speech bubble there. If you hit the speech bubble, that should bring the chat up along the side. And you can type any questions that you might have there. We started sort of 5 minutes late, so we'll go until 10 past 1, if that's okay. Yeah, it will. The PowerPoint and links will be emailed to all of the delegates, and it will also be available on the CAMHS website once we've got time to put that up. Okay, thank you, Heather. Thank you, Tracy. Hopefully a few ideas to go away with.
If there's anyone that has a question but the chat box isn't popping up, there should be a little hands up, raise your hand. If you've got a question, just pop that up, because I know for some people the chat bit isn't working.
It looks like lots of people have got other commitments going on at 1 o'clock. What I would say is if you have specific questions, you can email. Yes, it will be emailed out, Julia. It will.
I'm also just going to add the the form into the chat as well. If everyone could fill that out, that would be great for us.
Alison Campbell, you've just asked if there are any plans to have staff from CAMHS out and about in schools as they return. We are sending out a feedback sheet, and you can pop down any ideas about what you might find helpful from CAMHS on that. Certainly within the early intervention stream, the Liam workers will be getting back up and running with providing support to staff trained in delivering the Let's Introduce Anxiety Management work. Any suggestions for how to support young people struggling to adhere to social distancing requirements? I think there's just that acknowledgement that it's going to be really difficult for lots of young people. You can do bits and pieces of modelling, and how you approach it is going to be different depending on whether you're thinking about our primary school toots or our upper primary and academy. Certainly in the primaries, you know, you can do a lovely bit around acting it out with kids and taking time to really show them what that 2 metres or 1 metre looks like. And with older kids, I think if you can use visuals and have visual reminders, and as they come into class, we're doing that bit of reminding again. Unfortunately, we know that kids' executive functioning, that control bit of their brain, just isn't fully online yet. It's the nature of development, so it is just going to be continual reminding. Okay, I'm just having a wee look. Any ideas for individual CAM stations at children's own desks? That's a really lovely idea, and I was really curious as to whether kids would be allowed to have those in schools. And I've got families that are already really curious about that. You know, some kids who really need to have their, you know, their rubber toys or whatever it is with them. It's something to think about as a school group, I think, because lots of families will respond to that, and I think be really happy to provide tools for CAM stations. I'll mention it to the OT team as well to make sure that they pop in a bit about that to their resource. Okay, Fiona? That's great, Laurie. Yes, we'll make sure the PowerPoint is out. There was a lot of information. We appreciate that. Thank you, Marion. Okay.
We've also obviously recorded it, so you'll get the recording of kind of what we've said and things like that in it as well.
All right. If those are all the questions for now. Oh, Nikita. Yes.
Hi there. Sorry, the chat's not coming up for me. I was just asking if you guys have any like online videos for like calm down strategies and things that we could potentially share with parents online before the schools kind of start back, to kind of talk about some of the strategies that we could be using in our classroom when we go back.
That's a great question. So on that CAMHS resources website that I've referenced, there is a whole section on apps and video resources that can be used for those relaxations.
We also created some packs at the beginning of COVID on how to kind of help children with anxiety through that. And they have some great ideas of just things that you could do as a class and things as well. And that's on our individual CAMHS website. So there's one for parents, there's one for parents, young children, and your kind of teenagers as well. So the resources in either 3 of them would work really well.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask, because I don't have access to the chat at the minute, how would I get access to the form to fill it out for you guys?
We can email it around, yeah, because I have all the email addresses from when you signed up for the event, right?
Thank you.
Okay, Emma.
Hi, I just wondered if you would be able to return to the previous slide with the links that you spoke of, just so that I can open them on the spot. Would that be okay?
Of course.
Thank you.
There are really lovely resources embedded in these websites. They're definitely worth a look.
That's great, thank you. I think I've got that. Sorry.
Wonderful. Good. No, not at all. Okay. I think then if that's everything, then we will finish there. Thank you all so much for joining us. This has definitely been a bit of an experiment and an experience for us in CAMHS. Do fill out the feedback form, because if it's helpful and if there are other things that we might be able to share some information about, let us know, because if this works well for you guys, then we're interested in seeing how we can build on this as a resource. All right. Oh, I'm sorry about that, Mrs. Hay. Yes, we'll definitely get them sent out to you. Great. How do we access? Sorry, on you go, Natasha.
The form is a wee bit up on the chat. I actually think I can copy and paste it in again. Yeah, there we go. You should be able to see it now.
All right. That's lots of people heading off now.